Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. Hey, we're in October. We made it through July, August, and September, which was the final fiscal quarter. And now that information is going to be used, the data from the CPI figures will be used and calculated, compared and contrast to last year's and averaged out and blah, blah, in order to give us our COLA, cost of living adjustment. When is it coming? When will we know what the COLA, cost of living adjustment, that increase to our disability pay or our Social Security, what have you, when will that take effect? Well, I'll tell you that the numbers are supposed to come out on October 12th for the last CPI figures, which would be September's figures. Once those numbers come in, it should be fairly quickly, and we should see an announcement that same day. Now, what I pulled up here on NASDAQ.com regarding this specific issue is, when will the 2024 COLA be announced? And it states, the final COLA is typically announced by the Social Security Administration every October. This year, the Social Security Administration will set the final COLA at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can betcha I will be here. 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, October 12th, when the Bureau of Labor Statistics releases the inflation numbers for the third quarter. Right? So the third quarter of the calendar year, which is the last quarter of the fiscal year, which is always just kind of irritating, all these different fiscal years. And then on top of that, you have states that have their fiscal years that sometimes will run differently from both of those. So with that, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. Just wanted to read a couple more things from this article, but that's the main thing, right, is when is it going to be released? And now we know that most likely it'll be released on the 12th of October, the same day as the release of the CPI numbers. So you can expect that, and I will have a video up as soon as that happens. I will be watching the news at that time, and we'll put together a video and get that out as soon as possible. So the other things in this article, Social Security and the 2024 COLA, everything you need to know. I'll just read through it here real quick for you. When Americans retire, Social Security benefits, and we know by just the relationship, VA benefits as well. So Social Security benefits help bolster their income for retirees, and every year the government gives the 70 million recipients of those benefits a raise to bring their payments up to speed with inflation. And we all already know that really it's not enough, but that's another battle. So this cost of living adjustment, abbreviated COLA, is calculated by the Social Security Administration every fall based on the average inflation of the third quarter of the year, calendar year, which spans from July to September. The biggest, or the bigger, the difference is between this and the inflation rate for the previous year, the higher the COLA will be. Moving on, for instance, in 2023, we saw the 8.7% increase amid historic inflation from 2021 to 2022. Now that inflation has mostly cooled off, beneficiaries won't see a COLA that high again, according to the most recent estimate. But it's still crucial for retirees to understand and keep track of the changes to their Social Security benefits and, by default, veterans benefits. Keep reading for more information on the COLA and how it's calculated and what beneficiaries should expect going into 2024. What is the Social Security cost of living adjustment? As you likely know, the cost of goods and services like groceries, housing, and gas fluctuate constantly. Retired Americans tend to be especially impacted by the rising prices because they are often living paycheck to paycheck on fixed incomes, which can result in a gap between household expenses and their planned income from sources like 401k or pension. If retirees have to take more money from their savings to afford rising costs, then they run the risk of burning through those funds too soon, right? Until the 1970s, Congress had passed new legislation every time Social Security benefits required an increase. The annual rate of inflation more than doubled between 1969 and 1974. which rapidly reduced the buying power of retirees' benefits and threatened the sustainability of their savings. That led to Congress to enact legislation in 1972 that tied the COLA to the annual price changes in goods and services as measured by the Consumer Price Index for all wage earners and clerical workers, the CPI-W, and that's what's still used today. There are two pieces of legislation, if you don't know, that one on the House side and one on the Senate side that are both throwing out there to X out the CPI-W and replace it with CPI-E, which is an elderly indice, which would potentially raise the COLA about a 0.2 or 0.3 percentage points. So a little bit higher than what we would expect with the CPI-W. So that's we'll see what happens there. The provision made the yearly COLA increase automatic starting in 1975. That means that today retirees no longer have to wait for lawmakers to agree on when and how much to increase Social Security benefits. It just happens annually. How is the Social Security COLA calculated for retirees? Every month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks the change in prices of goods and services like food, healthcare, energy, using a measure called the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers. That's the CPI-U. A subset of this index is the CPI-W, and that is used to calculate COLA. That's because the CPI-W is narrower in population size and more closely reflects price changes for goods and services specific to retired Social Security beneficiaries who are at least 62 years of age. This segment of the population is especially impacted by price increases in areas like medical care, home maintenance, and transportation. However, side note, arguably that's not true, and that's why there's the pushes for the CPI-E to replace the CPI-W for COLA calculations. And I haven't heard from the Senior Citizens League on if they are for CPI-E. I know they are for change. I know they are for a better way to calculate COLA, but I'm not sure if they endorse CPI-E or not. That would be an interesting thing to find out. The annual COLA is determined by an average rate of inflation measured by the CPI-W in the third quarter of each fiscal year. So that's interesting. So really it should be the third quarter of each year, which is the last quarter of the fiscal year. The average third quarter inflation of the calendar year rate, that's why it's hard when people change back and forth from calling it in the year or calling it in the fiscal year, and if you flop back and forth, it just gets confusing. So the average third quarter inflation rate is then compared to that of the third quarter of the last year, and then the resulting difference is the COLA. If there is no increase between the 2 years, retiree benefits remained unchanged. This occurred in 2009, 2010, and 2015. For instance, the third quarter of 2022, the average inflation rate for the CPI-W was 8.7% higher than it was the third quarter of 2021. As a result, the 2023 COLA was 8.7%, the highest in 4 decades due to soaring inflation that began in mid-2021. On average, 2023 COLA increased monthly payments by about $140, making the typical Social Security payment about $1,700 for retirees. The Social Security COLA inflation and the CPI. Although the CPI-W is a more accurate reflection for retirees' expenses than the CPI-U, research shows that it is often not a perfect measure of their true household costs. A study published earlier this year by an advocacy group, how funny that they're talking, I swear I didn't read it. I saw the titles, found what I needed for the beginning of this video, which was the when's it going to come out, and now I'm just jumping into it. So interesting. All right, so anyway, a study published earlier this year by from an advocacy group, the Senior Citizens League, showed that even with the 2023's historic COLA benefits, still have not kept pace with inflation, particularly for retirees 85 years and older. The group compared the growth of COLAs from the last 2 decades to to changes in the cost of food, medication, and other common goods and services used by retirees, finding that Social Security benefits would have been roughly $516 more a month in 2023 on average if they had increased at the same rate of inflation. What's more, the study determined that for every $100 a retired household spent on goods and services in 2000, the same household could only afford $64 worth of its benefits in 2023. So let's repeat that here. So back in year 2000, $100 would buy X, and now in 2023, only $64 buys X. So there's a deficit. As such, some advocates and lawmakers are pushing for Congress. Oh, how funny. Good. I'm glad that they're doing this. All right. So another point that I brought up. So as such, some advocates and lawmakers are pushing for Congress to pass legislation that would change how the COLA is calculated. They argue that switching the index to the CPI-E, which measures price changes as they pertain to Americans 62 years old and up, would provide a better picture for retirees' true spending patterns and result in a more accurate COLA, which again is estimated to be about a 0.25%, we'll say. So it's not like it's this huge difference. It's a small difference, but it is higher, which is anything more is better. This might sound like a simple solution to the diminishing value of the Social Security benefits, but economists say adopting the CPI-E could do more harm than good in the long run. First, this index does not always measure retiree-specific price changes more accurately than the CPI-W, said Mark Goldwyn, Senior Vice President and Policy Director for the Nonprofit Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, previously told Money that the CPI-E had been used to track price changes over the last 2 years. The COLA would have been much lower than what was calculated using the CPI-W. So the question is, right, on average, would you end up higher, or on average, would you end up lower, is really what you should be looking at, not year by year. So let's move on from that. It does say here it kind of backs up the 0.2% a year increase, and then the rub there from an economist is you would then deplete the Social Security quicker, right? The insolvency would be quicker. Moving on, estimate for Social Security COLA next year. I wasn't going to do any more estimates. This is just sticking with what has already been estimated, which is the 3.2%. And again, we'll double down on the announcement date. It says that October 12th at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And when do Social Security payment increases? When do Social Security payments increase due to COLA? So when will you actually see the increase? Social Security beneficiaries start receiving their COLA increase at the beginning of the calendar year, and recipients of retirement benefits usually get paid on the 3rd of each month. That means beneficiaries will see their first payment that includes the 2024 COLA increase on January 3rd of next year for Social Security. For VA, it would be the 1st, right? So that's the 2. And then it goes into history and who really cares. So that's it. Wanted to bring you up to speed. The biggest piece of this, if you hung on till the very end, which is a pretty long, 14 minutes, sorry about that, is the announcement should be the same day that they release the CPI figures for September, which is October 12th at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The second thing is that yes, congressional efforts on both sides, House and Senate, to potentially switch from CPI-W to CPI-E, which would warrant approximately a 0.25% higher COLA on average per year, are still kind of out there. And with that, we'll go ahead and conclude it. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you have a great day. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.